There was a time when I had nothing, no money, no direction, just survival. But poverty is not just the absence of wealth. It is a mindset, a silent program installed by fear, fueled by doubt, and repeated through habit. I was poor not because of my bank account, but because of my beliefs. And when I began to shift those beliefs, one by one, everything changed. This journey isn't about becoming a millionaire. It's about unlearning weakness and choosing power. It's about replacing noise with clarity, distraction with purpose, and fear with discipline. I did not get rich, dear friends. I was poor because I lacked discipline, not because I didn't work hard, but because my energy was scattered. I chased outcomes without mastering the process. I wanted money, but I wasn't willing to face the discomfort that wealth demands. I thought desire was enough, but desire is just a spark. Discipline is the fire that keeps burning when motivation dies. Every time I failed, it wasn't because I lacked potential, it was because I lacked structure. I woke up late, hit snooze, made excuses, broke my own promises, and then wondered why my life never changed. I told myself I deserved rest. I told myself I was tired, but the truth is, I was just undisciplined, and being undisciplined is a quiet form of self-betrayal. But what changed my life was realizing that if I couldn't keep a promise to myself, how could I ever expect success to trust me? If I said I would wake up at 5, then I had to wake up at 5. Not because the time matters, but because self-respect matters. If I said I would work on a project daily, then I had to show up every single day, even if I felt uninspired, because that was my word, and my word had to mean something. Poverty taught me that time is not the issue, attention is. I had 24 hours like everyone else, but I gave my time to distractions, to entertainment, to impulses. I thought I was relaxing, but I was really just escaping. And every escape has a cost. The price was my progress. The price was my peace. And eventually I got tired of paying that price. I used to think discipline was restrictive. Now I understand it's the ultimate freedom. When you're disciplined, you're not controlled by emotions. You're not pulled by cravings. You're not distracted by noise. You choose your direction and stick to it, even when no one's watching, even when it's hard, even when the results aren't visible yet. That's when it counts the most. You see, most people want wealth, but they're addicted to comfort, and those two things don't coexist. You can't grow and stay comfortable at the same time. You can't reach the top while holding on to lazy habits. You can't build a rich life with a poor routine. So I started small. I started by mastering my mornings. I woke up before the sun, not because it was easy, but because it was symbolic. It was my way of saying I'm no longer living on default, I'm designing my day on purpose. I cut out things that didn't serve me, not out of punishment, but out of alignment. I stopped spending time with people who complained or blamed or gossiped. I stopped giving my focus to things that didn't make me stronger, sharper, calmer. I replaced every weak habit with one that reinforced my discipline. I trained my body, I trained my breath, I trained my focus. And over time, I didn't just look different, I thought different. There's a reason monks move with such clarity and power. They don't waste energy, they live with discipline. That's the secret, and it's not a secret hidden in books. It's hidden in your daily choices. Every time you choose discipline, you tell your subconscious that you are serious, and eventually the world responds to that certainty. Opportunities open, energy rises, clarity increases. You begin to feel unstoppable, not because the world changed, but because you did. I had to stop chasing motivation, because motivation is emotional. It comes and goes, but discipline is a decision. It stays as long as you keep choosing it, and I chose it again and again. Every morning when it was dark and quiet, I showed up. When it was boring, I showed up. When nothing was working yet, I showed up. And that built something inside me that no money could buy. Confidence, self-respect, internal strength. People think wealth is about strategy. Sometimes it is, but the strategy is worthless if you can't follow through. Ideas mean nothing without execution, and execution requires discipline. Without it, you keep starting and quitting, always waiting for the perfect time, always getting ready, but never moving forward. That's how you stay poor, even when you have talent, even when you have potential. I learned that the difference between poor and rich wasn't talent, it was consistency. Discipline is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter where you start, it matters how long you can stay committed. And I stayed. I stayed when it was hard, I stayed when it was slow, I stayed when it was lonely, and eventually, results started to show, not just financially, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. That shift from chaos to structure, from laziness to purpose, that's what builds a rich mind. And a rich mind eventually creates a rich life, because wealth is attracted to those who can handle it, and discipline is proof that you can handle it. It's the foundation of every success story, and it was the first mindset I had to master before I could even begin to rise. In the end, the lesson is simple. You don't get rich by accident. You don't get strong by wishing, and you don't change by talking. You change by doing, consistently, patiently, silently over time. And that journey begins with discipline, because without it, nothing else works without it. You stay stuck, and with it you move mountains, one quiet step at a time. Keep walking. I used to blame everything outside of me for the life I was living. I blamed my parents for not teaching me about money. I blamed my teachers for not preparing me for the real world. I blamed the government for making things hard. I blamed the economy for keeping me stuck, and in that blame, I found comfort, because as long as it was someone else's fault, I didn't have to change anything. But that comfort was a trap. It kept me poor. It kept me small. It kept me waiting for something outside of me to save me, and nothing ever came. One day I looked around and realized that years had passed and nothing had changed. I was still struggling, still frustrated, still stuck. And the people I blamed were not thinking about me. They were living their lives, and I was still waiting for a rescue that wasn't coming. That's when it hit me. Blame is a delay tactic. It feels powerful in the moment, but it gives all your power away. It says, I'm not in control. And if I'm not in control, then I can't change anything. And if I can't change anything, I stay poor in mind and in life. That's when the shift happened. I stopped pointing outward and started looking inward. I stopped asking, why is this happening to me, and started asking, what am I doing to create this? I started seeing every situation as a mirror, not a punishment, but a message. If I was broke, it wasn't bad luck. It was a reflection of how I handled money. If I was surrounded by drama, it wasn't just bad people, it was a reflection of my boundaries. If I was unmotivated, it wasn't the system, it was my own lack of clarity and purpose. Ownership is not easy. It demands brutal honesty. It forces you to admit that you've been in your own way. It makes you see that your excuses have built your reality. And when you see that clearly, you feel a mix of shame and power. Shame because you realize you've wasted time, but power because you finally understand that you can shape your future if you're willing to take responsibility for your past. I started owning my decisions. I owned the time I wasted. I owned the relationships I allowed. I owned the habits I kept. I owned the pain I avoided. I stopped saying I didn't have time and started saying I didn't make it a priority. I stopped saying I wasn't lucky and started saying I wasn't focused. I stopped saying I couldn't and started saying I wouldn't, because that was the truth. I wasn't willing, and that awareness gave me a choice. I could keep lying or I could rise. People avoid ownership because it hurts, but the truth is staying poor hurts more. Staying stuck hurts more. Living below your potential hurts more. The moment you take ownership, you stop being a victim and you become a creator. And that shift is everything. The poor mind waits, the rich mind builds. And you can't build with blame in your hands, because blame keeps you empty. It gives you reasons but no results. I began to ask better questions, not why is this unfair, but what can I learn from this? Not who's to blame, but what needs to change in me. Every problem became a puzzle, not a prison. Every challenge became a test of character, not a punishment. Life didn't get easier, I got stronger, and that strength came from choosing responsibility over resentment, again and again. I stopped expecting people to understand me or save me. I stopped needing approval. I stopped hoping for shortcuts. I accepted that I was responsible for every outcome I was creating, and in that acceptance, I found peace. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, but it was powerful. I no longer needed to fight reality. I just had to align with it and do the work. When I made a mistake, I owned it. When I failed, I studied it. When I lost, I still learned, because everything became fuel. Ownership made me hungry, not desperate. Hungry to grow, hungry to evolve, hungry to never return to that powerless state again. And as I shifted inward, my results shifted outward. I began to attract different people, different opportunities, different energy, because I was different. I was no longer the person waiting for change, I was the one creating it. People say life is unfair, and they're right, but that doesn't matter. What matters is how you respond. The rich mind doesn't wait for fairness, it adapts, it moves, it builds. The poor mind keeps score. The rich mind keeps building, and the moment I understood that, I stopped wasting energy on fairness and used that energy to forge forward with focus and intensity. Ownership also taught me humility, because you can't own your progress without owning your ignorance, and I had to admit, I didn't know how to build wealth. I didn't know how to manage time. I didn't know how to control my emotions, and instead of pretending I knew, I became a student of life again. I read, I listened, I practiced, I failed forward, and that mindset kept me growing. You don't become rich by pretending to know it all. You become rich by owning what you don't know and being relentless in learning it. The more I owned, the more I grew. The more I grew, the more I earned, not just money, but clarity, confidence, power. All of it came from within, not from circumstances, but from character. And character is built through responsibility. Blame is easy, but it leads nowhere. Ownership is hard, but it changes everything. The moment you choose to own your thoughts, your habits, your reactions, your standards, your actions, your results, you begin to unlock a different level of life. You begin to attract success, not because of what you chase, but because of who you become. And who you become is the only thing that truly matters. If you want to stay poor, keep blaming. If you want to get rich, start owning it. All own the pain, own the progress, own the process, because when you own it, you can change it. And when you can change it, there's nothing you can't build. And that's when you stop living by chance and start living by choice. Keep walking. There was a time when my mind was so loud I couldn't hear myself think. I was always reacting, always chasing, always moving from one thought to another, never stopping, never still. My days were filled with noise, opinions, distractions, fears, doubts, plans, problems, and all of it felt urgent, all of it felt important, and yet none of it brought me peace. None of it brought me wealth. I believed that if I just did more, worked harder, ran faster, then everything would fall into place. I thought action was everything. But I didn't understand that unfocused action is just motion without direction. It's busy without progress. And I was busy all the time, exhausted but going nowhere. I was building sandcastles on moving water, wondering why they kept falling apart. It wasn't until I learned to sit in silence that I began to hear the truth. It wasn't until I stopped reacting that I could start creating silence. Wasn't comfortable at first. It felt strange, it felt empty, but in that emptiness I discovered something. I had never really met myself before. I had lived for years but never listened. not to the deeper voice beneath the noise, the one that sees without judgment, the one that knows what I truly want, not just what I think I should chase. The world trains you to chase, but it doesn't train you to pause. It tells you to hustle, but not to reflect. And yet, without reflection, you cannot grow. Without silence, you cannot understand. Without stillness, you cannot sharpen the sword, and I was dull. My decisions were emotional, my thoughts were scattered, my vision was cloudy, because I had never cleaned the lens I looked through. Meditation was not something I found, it was something I returned to, something ancient, something natural. I began with just 5 minutes of silence every morning, no phone, no distractions, just me and my breath. At first the noise in my mind got louder, but then something shifted. I began to see the patterns, I began to see the stories I told myself, the lies, the fears, the excuses, and for the first time, I didn't run from them, I faced them. And that is where power begins, not in running, but in facing, not in reacting, but in observing. I realized that wealth does not begin with action, it begins with awareness. If you don't understand your own mind, you will always sabotage your own progress. You will always return to your old limits, because the mind left untrained is a trap. It repeats what is familiar, even when it no longer serves you. When I started building silence into my life, everything began to change. My decisions became clearer. I stopped reacting to every problem. I started responding with intention. I stopped chasing every opportunity. I started choosing the ones that aligned. I began to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Control, not over others, but over myself, over my thoughts, over my state, over my energy, and that control changed everything. People think success is external, but the seed is always planted within. The outer world is a mirror of the inner one. If your mind is chaotic, your results will be chaotic. If your mind is calm, your life will begin to reflect that calm. The richest people I've met are not the loudest. They are the most centered. They move with calm certainty. They know who they are, they know where they are going, and they don't get shaken by every wave. Silence taught me that not everything requires a reaction. Not every thought needs belief. Not every emotion needs to be followed. Some things just need to pass, and when you allow them to pass, they lose their power and you gain yours. I became rich the day I stopped giving my energy to thoughts that didn't serve me. The day I started choosing which voices to listen to and which ones to release. I no longer needed validation because I validated myself in silence. I no longer feared rejection because I had already faced my own insecurities in silence. I no longer chased approval because I had already built inner approval. And from that place I could make decisions that aligned with my values, not with fear, not with pressure, not with desperation, but with deep internal clarity. Wealth is attracted to clarity because clarity creates movement without hesitation, and hesitation is what destroys most people. They overthink, they doubt, they hesitate, they miss their moment, and all of that comes from noise. When you train the mind to be still, you remove the fog and you see the path, not because the path changed, but because now you are ready to walk it. I created space in my life, not just physically, but mentally. I stopped filling every moment with stimulation. I let myself be bored. I let myself reflect. I let myself feel what I had been avoiding. And in that stillness, I found direction, I found vision, I found focus, and I began to act from alignment, not impulse from depths, not surface from power, not panic. Every morning I returned to the silence before the world could pull me in, before the messages and headlines and alerts. I grounded myself. I trained my breath, I sharpened my mind, I reminded myself that nothing outside of me can shake what is rooted deeply within, and that became my foundation, the mind of a warrior and the heart of a monk. You don't need more noise, you need more depth. You don't need more motivation, you need more clarity. And clarity only comes when the mind is still, when the heart is heard, when the self is met, not as a concept, but as a presence. Wealth without peace is chaos, but peace is the soil where true wealth grows. I became rich not just in bank account but in being. I became rich in awareness, in focus, in purpose, and from that place money became a byproduct, not a pursuit. I didn't chase it, I attracted it through who I became, through how I moved, through what I chose to ignore and what I chose to nurture. There's no secret formula, only this: train the mind, calm the breath, silence the noise and listen, because everything you're seeking begins with knowing yourself. Not the mask, not the performance, the real you, and that can only be found in stillness. Keep walking. There was a time I believed that knowledge alone would make me successful. I consumed books, podcasts, videos, seminars, thinking that the more I knew, the faster I would grow. I gathered ideas, collected strategies, memorized principles, but I remained stuck. I thought I had a mindset problem or a motivation problem, but the truth was far more uncomfortable. I didn't have an action problem, I had an embodiment problem. I understood the words, but I didn't live them. I spoke about discipline, but I still hit snooze. I preached focus, but I still chased distractions. You do not become rich by understanding concepts, you become rich by becoming the concept itself. It's not about what you say, it's about what you do repeatedly, especially when no one is watching. Anyone can speak wisdom, few can embody it. Because embodiment is not about knowing, it's about becoming. It's not about remembering, it's about reflecting it in every action, every choice, every breath. When I realized this, everything changed. I stopped being a student of theory and became a practitioner of truth. I didn't just study discipline, I lived it. I didn't just talk about ownership, I practiced it. I didn't just learn about presence, I committed to it. I stopped saying I wanted transformation and started proving it with my habits, not once or twice, but every day. I looked in the mirror and asked myself, does my behavior reflect my values? And if the answer was no, I changed, not later, not tomorrow, now. People wait to feel ready to become someone new. They wait for the right time, the right moment, the right motivation. But the truth is, there is no right time. There is only alignment and action. The moment you choose to align your actions with the wisdom you claim to know, you begin to activate real power. Until then, it's just talk. And talk doesn't change your bank account. Talk doesn't change your body. Talk doesn't change your life. Action does. But only when that action is consistent and congruent with the truth. Embodiment means you don't just discipline yourself in public, you do it when you're alone. It means you don't just speak about focus, you eliminate everything that steals it. It means you don't just say you want to succeed, you design your life in a way that makes success inevitable. You become intentional about your time, about your circle, about your inputs, about your responses. Everything becomes sacred because everything reflects your level of commitment. I had to face the gap between what I said and what I lived, and that gap was the space where all my frustration lived, because deep down I knew I was capable of more, but my behavior was not matching that knowing, and that creates internal friction, the kind that drains your energy and kills your confidence, not because you lacked potential, but because you lack alignment. So I got brutally honest. I stopped telling myself comforting lies. I stopped pretending I was doing enough. I stopped excusing my half efforts and I began to close the gap. I said I wanted mastery, so I trained like a master.